Question 40. The table best supports which of the following conclusions? A. European powers did not provide financial support for the maintenance of their colonies. B. European powers maintained colonies despite global war and economic depression. C. Europeans migrated and established settler communities in Africa. D. Revenue from cash crops accounted for the majority of other income in French African colonies. 41. The revenues section of this table can best be used to illustrate which of the following continuities before pre-1900 and post-1900 European imperialism. A. Competition between European colonial powers encouraged imperial expansion. B. Some African peoples successfully resisted colonial economic exploitation. C. Colonial powers directly subsidized most of the expenditures needed to maintain their colonies. D. Colonial powers sought to extract wealth and economic resources from the colonized people. Question 42. The expenditures shown in the table most strongly illustrate which of the following? Despite some medical advances, the environment in Africa continued to present unique challenges to European imperialism. B. Despite economic challenges they faced at home, European imperial powers continued to finance local manufacturing in their colonies. C. The primary objective of European imperialism in Africa was to stop the rule of private joint stock companies. D. European colonial powers did not build roads, bridges, or railroads in the African territories under their control. 43. Which of the following pieces of data from the table most directly contradicts the claim of European imperial powers that colonies existed for the benefit of the colonized? A. Colonized peoples were expected to pay taxes to support the colonial government. B. Expenditures on administrative salaries were far greater than what was spent on public works and infrastructure. C. The colonial government received income from the postal system and from telegraph services. D. A significant portion of colonial budget was provided by the French government. Go on to the next page. Questions 44 through 46 refer to the two passages below. Source number 1. The British have, for many decades, had settled notions about India's future. Their concept of party government and parliamentary rule has become the ideal with them as the best form of government for every country. It is extremely difficult to appreciate that our Hindu friends fail to understand the real nature of Islam and Hinduism. It is only a dream that the Hindus and Muslims can ever evolve a common nationality. This misconception of one Indian nation will lead India to destruction if we fail to revive our notions in time. The Hindus and Muslims in India belong to two different religious philosophies, social customs, literatures. They have different epics and different heroes. Very often the hero of one is the foe of the other. To yoke together two such nations under a single state, one as a numerical minority and the other as a majority, must lead to growing discontent and final destruction of any fabric that can be built for the government of such a state. Muhammad al-Jinnah, leader of the All Indian Muslim League, an organization of Indian Muslims that had split from the Indian National Congress, addressing the meeting of the League in March of 1940. Source 2. We, the inhabitants of India, have one thing in common, and that is our Indianness, which we share despite our religious and cultural differences. Just as our different features and personalities do not affect our common humanity, so our religions and cultural differences should not interfere with our shared association with our homeland. Therefore, like other religious groups in India, we Muslims have a duty to struggle for the attainment of our common Indian interests. and fight against the evils that hamper our common progress and prosperity. That is what I mean when I ask for a common nationhood of all Indians. The Indian National Congress, having the same position as ours, has made provisions for the protection of all religious cultures and language in the future Indian state. On the other hand, the European concept of nationalism is unacceptable in our organization. We denounce it and are totally against it. Hussain Ahmad Ahmadi, leader of the Council of Indian Muslim Religious Scholars, addressed to the annual meeting of this organization in June of 1940. Questions on the next page. Question 44. Taken together, the two sources best support which of the following conclusions regarding the situation in British India in 1940? A. The British skillfully manipulated religious tensions within India to rally support for the imperial war effort. B. Indian opposition to British rule involved groups pursuing very different political goals. Indian Muslims. C. Indian Muslims, religious scholars rejected Gandhi's emphasis on nonviolence to achieve political change. D. There was a clear difference between Hindus and Muslim visions for what post-war India should be. 45. During the negotiations of the end of the British rule in India in the aftermath of the Second World War, British actions were ultimately most strongly influenced by which of the following arguments? A. The argument in source 1 that, for the British, the concept of party government and parliamentary rule has become the ideal for every country. B. The argument in source A that to yoke together two such nations under a single state would lead to destruction. C. The argument in source 2 that religious and cultural differences should not interfere with the Indians' shared association with our homeland. D. The argument in source 2 that the Indian National Congress has made provisions for the protections of all religious cultures and languages in a future Indian state. 46. In the second half of the 20th century, the kind of tension illustrated by the two sources would most likely lead to the emergence of which of the following in post-colonial Asian and African states? A. Communist movements. B. Popular movements advocating for the restoration of colonial rule. C. Movements advocating for regional autonomy. D. Famine and epidemics. 47 through 51 refer to the graph below. Graph 1, total global carbon dioxide emissions from 1960 to 2016. Graph 2, the share of global carbon dioxide emissions by country from 1960 to 2016. Go on to the next page. 47. The overall trend in the global carbon dioxide emissions in graph 1 was primarily caused by the A. Increase in use of petroleum and other fossil fuels. B. Destruction of rainforests and expansion of deserts. C. Development of genetically modified crops. D. The proliferation of nuclear weapons. 48. The trend in the graph 1 most directly led to which of the following? A. International efforts to help newly independent nations address air pollution in their major cities. B. Debates regarding the cause and extent of humanity's contributions to climate change. C. Binding international commitments to break up the big multinational energy companies. D. The growing popularity of nuclear power as an alternative energy source. Question 49. The environmental processes illustrated by the two graphs are most closely associated with A. An increase in biodiversity in many regions. B. A decline in soil fertility rates in many regions. C. an increase in epidemic diseases in many regions. D, the decline in air and water quality in many regions. Question 50. The trends for China and India in the graph 2 are best understood in the context of A, regional economic impacts in the Great Leap Forward on industrial production. B, breakup of European colonial empires in the aftermath of the Second World War. C, the shift of industrial production towards Asia beginning in the late 20th century. D, efforts of international financial organizations to encourage greater cooperation among countries. 51. Which of the following historical events best explains why, in the period 1990 to 2000, the trends in carbon dioxide production in the United States and in Russia diverge, as shown in graph 2? A. While the United States economy mostly continued to grow, Russia's economy contracted following the collapse of the Soviet Union. B. While the United States increased its dependency on fossil fuels, Russia relied more on nuclear energy. C. While the United States experienced the benefits of the Green Revolution, Russia experienced a decline in agricultural production. D. While the United States relies on imports of oil and gas, Russia remains largely self-sufficient in energy production. On to the next page. Questions 52 to 55 refer to this passage. 1. Scientists have reached general agreement in recognizing that mankind is one, that all men belong to the same species, Homo sapiens. 10. The scientific material available to us at present does not justify the conclusion that inherited genetic differences are a major factor in producing differences between the cultures and cultural achievements of different peoples or different groups. 14. The biological fact of race and the myth of race should be distinguished. For all practical social purposes, race is not so much a biological phenomenon as a social myth. The myth of race has created an enormous amount of human and social damage. In recent years, it has taken heavy toll in human lives and caused untold suffering. A. According to present knowledge, there is no proof that the groups of mankind differ in their innate mental characteristics, whether in respect of intelligence or temperament. B. There is no evidence that race mixture or such produces bad results from a biological point of view. C. All normal human beings are capable of learning to share in common life, to understand the nature of mutual service and reciprocity, and to respect social obligations and contracts. United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO Statement about the Science of Race, 1949. 52. The Declaration can best be understood as a rejection of which of the following ideals? A. The belief that some groups of people are inherently superior to others. B. The belief that all cultures have intrinsic value. C. The belief that race is a social construction. D. The belief that the concept of race has had a major impact on human interactions. 53. The Declaration's mention of a heavy toll in the third paragraph is most likely a reference to which of the following? A. The casualties of the First World War. B. The deaths that occurred as a result of the use of nuclear weapons in the Second World War. C. The deaths that occurred during the Holocaust. D. The mass violence that occurred under the communist leaders such as Mao Zedong. 54. The Declaration is an example of which of the following post-Second World War developments? The creation of institutions to aid the economic development of newly independent nations. B. The increase in international migration in search of economic opportunities. C. The escalation of violence and proxy wars between countries during the Cold War. D. The efforts of international organizations to promote human rights. 55. All of the following statements are factually accurate. which would most directly support the claim in the first paragraph that science